In the final days of August 1862, General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia delivered a crushing blow to his adversary, Major General John Pope's Army of Virginia, at the Second Battle of Manassas. However, the aggressive Lee was not satisfied with merely defeating Pope. He wanted Pope's army destroyed. In order to do so, Lee directed Major General Thomas Stonewall Jackson to position his command between Pope's retreating army and the fortifications of Washington. Jackson's immediate goal was to occupy Germantown, a strategic road junction through which Pope's demoralized army had to pass. On August 31st, one day after the fighting at Second Manassas, Jackson led his command northward along the Gum Springs Road, turned east on the Little River Turnpike, and stopped for the night at Pleasant Valley. By 7 a.m. on September 1st, Jackson's column was on the move again. Throughout the day, a screen of Confederate cavalry on the Little River Turnpike skirmished with its Union counterparts, alerting Pope to the threat on his right flank. To counter this threat, Pope ordered a Major General Joseph Hooker to establish a defensive position at Germantown. Hooker's movement caused Jackson to halt his command just 4 miles from the Germantown intersection, where he awaited the remainder of Lee's army. Pope, still uncertain of Jackson's plans, put Brigadier General Isaac Stevens' division on the march. His objective was to establish a defensive line across the Little River Turnpike 2 miles west of Hooker's Germantown position. By 1 p.m., Stevenson's division had begun its march east on the Warrenton Turnpike together with Major General Jesse Reno's division. Jackson's wing continued to await Longstreet's arrival near Ox Hill. Around 4 p.m., patrols reported the presence of Union troops just to their south. Jackson sent 2 brigades under Major General A.P. Hill to investigate the strength and intention of the nearby Union troops. Soon after, Jackson began deploying the rest of his wing for the upcoming battle. Stevens observed a thin line of Confederates advancing out of the woods north of the Reed Farm. To accomplish his orders and keep open the Union line of retreat, Stevens needed to drive the Confederates from his front. He deployed 2 companies of the 79th New York as skirmishers, sending them down the slopes of the Big Rocky Run and across the unfinished railroad bed against the Confederate skirmishers. Shortly before 4:30 p.m., Colonel Edward Ferrero's brigade arrived on the scene together with Major General Jesse Reno, the overall commander of the Union force. Reno, however, was rather ill and content to leave the tactical direction of the battle in Stevenson's hands without seriously altering the plan of attack. Instead, Reno directed Ferrero to cover Stevens' flank by moving into the woods east of the Ox Road. The 51st New York and the 21st Massachusetts disappeared into the woods, while the 51st Pennsylvania stayed to protect Durell's Pennsylvania battery as it came onto the battlefield. With what began as a constant drizzle now turning into a steady downpour, General Stevens could wait no more. As he and his staff dismounted their horses, Stevens called out to his men, "Division, Guide Center, forward march!" With the commander's words still ringing in the air, Lieutenant Colonel David Morrison's brigade stepped off toward the hidden Confederate positions to their front. Stevens ordered his newly adjusted lines to advance toward the trees, but as they marched, the thunderstorm broke into its full fury. The pelting rain turned the bare earth of the cornfield into a muddy quagmire and soaked through the gunpowder, making many weapons useless. Despite worsening conditions and lowered visibility, Stevens continued to press his division forward. With his attack stalling, General Stevens grabbed the colors of the 79th New York and urged his men forward, shouting, "Highlanders, my Highlanders, follow your general!" As he stepped over the remains of a snake rail fence, a single Confederate shot slammed into the general's temple, killing him instantly. Incensed by their loss, the Union forces surged toward the rebels just inside the woods. After Stevens' death, the Union command fell to Colonel Benjamin Christ. The disheartened 29th Massachusetts and 79th New York began to virtually disintegrate, and to make matters worse, the entire division was running low on ammunition. With the tide of battle shifting, Stevens' division began a slow withdrawal back across the fields they had fought so hard to secure. Prior to his ill-fated assault, Stevens sent his aide, Lieutenant Horatio Belcher, to look for additional support. Coming upon Major General Philip Kearny, Belcher requested that Kearny and his troops come to the rescue of Stevenson's battered division. Kearny exclaimed, "By God, I will support Stevens anywhere." Kearny, along with Brigadier General David B. Birney's brigade, arrived on the field at 5:15 p.m. As Birney's brigade moved into position, he was assured by Reno that Stevens' reformed division would support his advance. With Stevens' attack now repulsed, Jackson wisely made use of his lull in the battle to readjust Confederate lines in the cornfield. By strengthening his lines to better cope with any new Union threat, Jackson's position was greatly improved. Now in position opposite the Confederate right flank, Birney began to move his oversized brigade forward. Seeing that his right flank was not being supported by Stevens' battered division as Reno promised, Birney requested that Colonel Orland Poe's brigade be placed on his exposed flank. Kearny rode off in search of more support for his assault. General Kearny came across the 79th New York and boomed out, "Scotsman, you must follow me." Finding the 79th out of ammunition, Kearny rode on. Just about that time, the 21st Massachusetts emerged from the woods east of Ox Road. Kearny ordered them to reinforce Birney's right. Brushing aside the protests of the regiment's commanding officer, Kearny repeated his order. Kearny, infuriated with the hesitation of the 21st Massachusetts, rode forward to determine the cause of their slow advance. Dismissing reports of nearby Confederates, he ventured into the cornfield for a personal reconnaissance of the front. Suddenly, Kearny was surprised by Confederates under the command of Colonel Edward Thomas. Wheeling his horse in a desperate attempt to avoid capture, Kearny was gunned down by the Georgians in Thomas's brigade. The disheartened 29th Massachusetts and 79th New York began to virtually disintegrate, and to make matters worse, the entire division was running low on ammunition. With the tide of battle shifting, Stevens' division began a slow withdrawal back across the fields they had fought so hard to secure. By nightfall, the Battle of Chantilly was over. Jackson, having failed in his objective to cut off the Union retreat, began pulling back from Ox Hill around 11 p.m. The last remnants of his command withdrew early on the morning of September 2nd. Union forces remained on the field until ordered to resume the Army's march toward Washington around 2:30 a.m. Both armies began more than 2 weeks of marching and maneuvers that culminated along Antietam Creek in Maryland on September 17th.